Hi, this is Penny from the Cascade branch, and I brought my husband along with me, Mike, formerly of the Kellogg'sville branch, to talk books. This is Summer Wonder Book Talks for Adults, and Mike and I are going to talk about what we've been reading recently, and hopefully you'll check it out. Mike, why don't you go first? What have you read?
Well, I checked out my audiobook on Libby for Overdrive, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. So, Talking to Strangers, Malcolm Gladwell. The title might confuse you a little bit. It's not about walking up to someone at the grocery store, striking up a conversation, and making them your BFF. It's about colossal failures of communication in our history and how we could just recognize that they're a fact of life. The book was published in 2019, September of 2019. Amazon has it a 4.5 out of 5 for reviews. Over 3,000 people reviewed it. Some examples they give you in the audiobook, which is, again, very different experience than the print book, because you actually hear some of the voices. Now, we don't hear the voice of Neville Chamberlain, but you remember from World War II, Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and the Munich Agreement signed off part of Czechoslovakia to Adolf Hitler. Well, the example they give in the book is it wasn't just Neville Chamberlain that was fooled. It was a lot of people. Hitler just lied to them, and they believed him until they were proven wrong. Some of the other examples, Fidel Castro knew almost exactly what the CIA was going to do because he had a spy that was in charge of CIA operations in Cuba. She was, vetted and all those kinds of things, looked at, and right in front of their eyes, she was making surreptitious daily reports on a ham radio frequency to Fidel Castro's people. In Michigan, we remember the case of Dr. Larry Nassar in Michigan State. They have some very compelling interviews with some of the victims of Larry Nassar's abuse for the Gymnastics Association, the gymnasts, the parents of the young ladies. They have interviews with Jerry Sandusky, the Penn State coach, and you hear their voices. And one of the experiences they give is they plug in information on people eligible for bail. And one of the things that judges are fond of is seeing someone in person and examining them and asking them questions. Well, it turns out the judges are no better than computers at predicting who's the best candidate for bail. So there's all kinds of examples in the audiobook. You hear people's actual voices, and it's just a fascinating book. And it just kind of gives you some idea.
Is he talking about lying? I mean, how you can tell people are lying, or
no? There's the default to believe principle. That's my approximation of his term. Is your default to believing people? That's people's natural inclination, is to just believe whatever someone's saying. That if some strange circumstances, well, there's an explanation for it. And Jerry Sandusky had a great reason for all these different things, and for years the abuse persisted. So it's just how it's a story of miscommunication and colossal failures, and with the recognition within yourself is, are these things making sense? And just have you evaluate yourself whether someone should be believed. Now, we're not judges, most of us. We're not police officers, most of us. We're not in charge of making some big determination. But that default to believe is hardwired in us. And I'd never heard that term. I just thought it was a fascinating book, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. The audiobook is read by the author. And again, you get excerpts of people, just the heartbreaking stories of those gymnasts that were abused by Larry Nassar. It was just heartbreaking to hear those stories. And that default to believe is something that, and it's just something that's hardwired in our psyche. Fascinating book. Highly recommend it. Malcolm Gladwell, Talking to Strangers.
He's a great author about lots of social subjects. Tipping Point was another one of his.
He's prolific, yes.
Yes, very famous. Oh. I talked I mean, I also read a nonfiction book this week, and look, I have a piece of paper of the cover. Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb. This one's very popular. It's one of those nonfiction books that's sometimes they can be slow starters and they build and build and then just get amazingly popular. And this one is heading in that direction. It was fascinating to me. Laurie Gottlieb, she started out wanting to be a writer, and she wrote for TV, and she was a writer on very famous TV shows. She could drop many big actor names. And one of the series she was writing for took place in a hospital, and she was getting some research, getting the inside scoop from doctors and nurses in an actual hospital. So she'd go visit and she'd say, okay, in an emergency situation, where would you stand and what would you say? And then what would happen here, so that she could go back to the set and kind of make it look realistic for everybody and write things that actually happened. But she really enjoyed working at the hospital so much and being there and seeing the patients and helping them feel better, that she ended up deciding she wanted to go back to medical school. So she went back to medical school and was very interested in the psyche and the brain, and started studying that and thinking about becoming a psychiatrist, and was told by her mentor that, you won't spend a lot of time with your patients if you're a psychiatrist. It's with the prescription pad these days, with those kind of things. If you want to actually get to know people and have that long-lasting relationship, you want to be a therapist, which is get your degree in therapy, in clinical therapy, and do that, because as a doctor, she wouldn't really have that time to connect with her patients anymore. So that's what she does. She studies, she has a baby on her own, and she becomes a therapist, and we're traveling through her journey, but also we're going back and forth in time to her time on the therapy couch and her time with her patients. So if you've ever wondered what happens on a therapy couch, you can kind of peek in the window in this book, and you can hear, she uses a conglomerate of her different patients and makes them up a little bit. So she's not giving away anyone's, obviously, deep, dark medical secrets, but you see how the relationship of a person with their therapist builds. And you can see how some people change and how they talk about their things, how she works to discover what's really going on. Because, when people first come in, they don't tell you what's really going on. And it's so funny, when she was in therapy, she kept telling the therapist that she just has to get over this patch and figure out why her boyfriend left her, and she has to get through this, and I just need a therapist right now to get me over this. And she kept saying that, and she kept crying in his office, and that's what was wrong. Half my life is over, and it was just dismal. I mean, she was a strong woman with this great career, and all of this is going on, but she was falling apart on this couch. And she discovers for herself that that's not really what was going on. There was a bunch in the background. And that's what you find out from her patients on the couch and from herself, that there's a lot more going on in the background. It's very interesting to discover. And it's a very positive book, and that most of what you find out about these people is that they're not as bad as they appear on the surface. One of her patients is this mean, studio executive who's just obnoxious, and everybody's stupid, and he's the only one who knows what's going on. And you even get under his hard crust, and you find out some things that made him the way that he is there. So it was very fascinating to read. Maybe you should talk to someone. So if you want to peek in on the couch and learn a bit about the human psyche, I recommend that. It's available. It's got a little bit of a waiting list. So Mike and I have been talking about books that you can get right now from Hoopla. And I felt guilty because mine is popular. I had to wait for it. It's been out for a while, but like I said, with nonfiction, it can build. And Mike's is on overdrive. Do you have to wait for yours, Mike?
Yes, I did. It was just a couple weeks.
Talking to Strangers with Malcolm Gladwell. There's a waiting list on that one too. So I'm going to throw in one that I liked years ago, but it's still around, and it's available on Hoopla right now. Island Beneath the Sea by Isabel Allende. It was just it's one of those books that you just hug afterwards. It was such a beautiful book. It's historical fiction. It takes you to a completely other place, and you meet characters that you'd love to meet and find out what makes them tick and how they survived. And it's about Tete, who's a slave in Haiti around 1770. So if you know anything about the Haitian history, you know that they're going to have very shortly a slave revolution. And it's one of the only countries, I think it is the only country in the world with a successful slave revolution. So you go to Haiti before that happens, and you see it through the eyes of Tete and other slaves, but also through Valmoran. He's the slave owner. He owns Tete. He bought her there on the island. And it's about their relationship. It's about what it was like to be a sugarcane slave in Haiti. I mean, the horrors and just working in that sweltering heat and cutting cane, and how a Frenchman came there thinking he would make his fortune. That was what he was supposed to do, make his fortune. When he first gets there, he's like, well, in France, everything was much more civilized, and we talk about art and culture and books. And we never would have even considered, the horrible mistreatment of human beings with slavery. But you get there, and greed takes over, and wanting to succeed and wanting more money, and you just end up using people to such atrocity. They stopped letting their slave children have their own children, because the kids wouldn't survive in Haiti under those circumstances. So the story follows Tete and Valmoran because he ends up being the father of 4 of her children. And when the slave revolt happens, they leave together and they go to New Orleans. This is, of course, when slavery was still legal in the United States. So they have obviously a very complicated relationship. But what it made me feel in this book was that Tete, who is a slave, who has been abused, who lives in this horrendous culture, she is still very strong person. She is her own person. She's trying to find love in the world. She's trying to find a better life for her children. She's trying to find freedom. She's existing in a world. She's praying to her gods, who are the Haitian gods, who we would call voodoo gods. And when she comes to New Orleans, she gets to know Catholics there, and even a nun. She's helping her to help someone else give birth, and she's praying to her gods. And the nun, it's Jesus that we pray to. And Tete's like, well, what if he's busy? So she's praying to her gods too. So, I mean, it's the religion and the culture and everything she's gone through. It's epic. And her voice is so lyrical. Isabel Allende is just a fascinating person in her own right. She's related to an ousted Chilean leader whose name I forget because I remember books and not political leaders. And she actually was born in Peru and raised in Chile. So you get a flavor for, if you want to leave the area for a while, go to the 1700s and discover a new world with new people, please check out Isabel Allende's Island Beneath the Sea. So we got 3 books in today.
Bonus time.
Yes, please join us next week. There'll be different librarians next week for Summer Wonder Book Talks for Adults every Tuesday at 6:30. And this program will continue throughout the summer, and you might see something very close to it this fall. Please remember that curbside is now happening, and it's quite busy at Cascade, at least, at all of KDL's branches. So if you want an actual physical book, you can now get one by placing a hold at kdl.org and coming over and picking it up, giving us a call when you get here. Thanks for listening all the way to the end, everybody. I hope you like the books. Please comment. Let us know if you've read these books, if you like these books, or if you've got some others to recommend. Hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.